Chapter 20, The Game. On February 23, 2010 at 11 a.m., Vicentillo was brought before Judge Ruben Castillo, the only judge with Mexican roots in the Northern District of Illinois Court in Chicago, located in a huge skyscraper with tinted windows in the downtown area. It must have been a cold morning. Typically around this time of year, the temperature in the so-called Windy City ranges between 4 and minus 7 degrees Celsius. He pleaded not guilty. The criminal charges filed against him in 2009 include his father, El Chapo, Alfredo Guzman Salazar, El Chapo's son, Tomás Arevalo Renteria, Benny Armando Contreras Subias, Juan Guzman Rocha, and the twins, Pedro Margarito Flores. They are accused of trafficking hundreds of kilograms of heroin and cocaine to the United States from 2005 to 2008. Vicentillo's defense team included attorneys George Luis Santangelo, Alvin Stewart Michelson, Edward Sam Panzer, and Fernando X. Gasiola. What would follow in the coming months would be a power play between the United States government and the son of the man who truly was and is the most important drug trafficker of all time. The only one who had the inhumanity, the cold-heartedness, the money, the mentality, and the complicity of hundreds to get him there. Immediately after entering the Chicago MCC, he was assigned inmate number 22875-424. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, the kind worn only by high-risk inmates, and locked in a cell in the special confinement unit, unable to speak or see any other prisoners, his cell was no more than 15 square meters in size. It had a mat, 3 blankets, 2 sheets, a pillow, a toilet, a sink, and a tiny desk where he spent hours sitting and writing much of what I've published here. He was assigned 4 cells. He was moved from cell to cell every 2 days, so he couldn't even form a sense of belonging behind bars. He was forbidden to speak to anyone or be spoken to by anyone. He could only speak to his counselor and prison staff above the rank of lieutenant. But on the floor, where he was held, there was neither a counselor nor staff at that rank. He didn't receive food at the same time as the other prisoners. It was given to him 2 or 3 hours later and was usually cold. His wife Cynthia and his mother Chaito wrote to him almost every day, but the letters arrived months late. He had no access to fresh air. The golden rays of the Sinaloa sun had been replaced by the cold neon light shining on his face 24 hours a day. His glasses were broken, and he hadn't been given any replacements. The only air he breathed was the air recycled inside the prison. In December 2010, I published The Lords of Drug Trafficking, when attorney Fernando Gasiola contacted me to tell me Vicentillo's story. As I mentioned above, I was being threatened by Public Security Secretary Genaro Garcia Luna for revealing his and his inner circle's complicity with the Sinaloa cartel. I knew that some powerful businessmen were very concerned about the book's contents and had considered filing defamation lawsuits against me. But they thought better of it because they calculated I would have documents and witnesses to prove the allegations of their involvement in drug trafficking. My book wasn't about drug trafficking folklore. Evidently it wasn't. It was about a list of things that he snitched on and people that he snitched on and positions that he snitched on. That's what it was. Fascinating nonetheless, but sold to us a different way. Sold to us as a story of a traitor. My book wasn't about drug trafficking folklore. It's songs, it's women, it's clothes, it's guns, it's gunshots, it's violence. It was about exposing the underlying problem, complicity with the state, the same complicity that has allowed criminals to accumulate such power over years that they have the ability to subjugate entire towns, cities, and states, and even bring the president of the republic to his knees. I can't argue with her on that. She's not wrong there. That's where Gaciola's path and mine crossed. He wanted to tell me Vicentillo's story, his dealings with the DEA, and the protection the Sinaloa cartel's top boss has enjoyed for 6 years. For my part, I was interested in learning more about that criminal organization and understanding the inner works of its operations, the source of its power, and also its weaknesses. There were things only a boss could tell you directly, and I wanted to hear them. Since his extradition, the DEA had been unwilling to honor the agreement with Vicentillo. They refused to admit that the Sinaloa cartel had collaborated with them. But Vicentillo and his lawyers weren't willing to let him be treated like just another criminal. They wanted the benefits that the kind of collaboration his father and El Chapo had offered for years could bring. He never knew this until, in that meeting before his arrest, Mayo and El Chapo revealed it to him. So basically, him and his family been paying off police and politicians for 50 years, and when the shit hit the fan, he wanted to turn around and point the finger at them, and of course, they weren't going to allow that. When I met Gasiola, both sides were at that turning point. The lawyer told me an incredible story. Not long before, the Fast and Furious case had broken out, in which it was proven that the United States government had authorized arms trafficking to Mexico to supposedly uncover arms networks and routes, allowing more than 2,000 weapons to enter the country illegally. Many ended up in the hands of the Sinaloa cartel. Now the lawyer sitting in front of me assured me that the Sinaloa cartel's leadership had been collaborating with the DEA since at least 1998. They gave them the information that the agency used together with the Mexican government to combat enemy cartels. In return, the agency provided them with protection. It is safe to say that the Sinaloa cartel was built off the back and protection of the Drug Enforcement Administration of the United States of America. Your favorite cartel, your superheroes, your daddies were the sons of law enforcement in the United States of America. Deal with it. Stop crying and bitching about who ratted. They all ratted. It's a rat game. And this is not me saying it. This is one of your heroes putting it out there in this book. Vicentillo, the golden son of El Mayo. In The Lords of Drug Trafficking, I had already talked about the Iran-Contra case, 1985 and 86, and how the American government tolerated the CIA making agreements with the Colombian and Mexican cartels to allow their drugs to reach the United States in exchange for some of the profits reaching the Nicaraguan Contras who were fighting to overthrow the Sandinista regime. Okay, this is what crack was brought to the hood for. This is what crack was flooding the hood for, to pay for wars that the CIA needed to win in other places. If you don't believe that to be true, look up Ricky Ross's story. That's his story. And it's a fact. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. I was familiar with the American pragmatism, but the story Gasiola was telling me was almost implausible. I told him I would publish the story if I had proof of what he was saying. So on March 25th, 2011, when no one else was paying attention to Vicentillo's case in the Chicago court, I revealed that the trial would open an unprecedented Pandora's box and published the document presented by the defense lawyers in which they argued that the United States government could not try their client because he had immunity or public authority from the same government to commit the crimes of which he was accused, and that for years the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel had maintained a relationship with the DEA, ICE, the FBI, and other government agencies. Anybody that goes into the comments and just simply puts rat, throw the whole fucking cartel culture out the window. Throw it in the trash. Throw it away. Throw it out. It's all built on a lie. Stay out that game. If you're a 12-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid, and you're a cartel culture nut hugger, here's the proof to you that the Sinaloa cartel was built on American law enforcement agencies. That would mean the moment you join the rat agency. Those who would have granted them immunity would have been the DEA Regional Assistant for South America, the DEA General Director in Mexico, as well as DEA agents assigned to the cities of Monterrey and Hermosillo and Mexico City. The lawyers for Mayo's son had revealed their clause. If the American government didn't want to respect the agreement with Vicentillo, they would reveal all the uncomfortable secrets. The first hearing I attended was on March 30th, 2011, in Judge Castillo's half-empty courtroom. Mayo's son appeared, his feet shackled, wearing an orange jumpsuit. He had lost 10 kilos since being incarcerated at the MCC. So the uniform, already larger than his usual size, now resembled the clown suit. The very one I believe led him to make the crude self-portrait. Local and international media outlets turned their attention to Judge Castillo's court. The prosecutor's office's retaliation for the document and the article I had published was swift. On April 5th, they increased the charges against Vicentillo. They focused more accusations on him. They identified him as a logistics operator for the Sinaloa cartel and added 4 charges against him. The trial was scheduled to begin in the second half of 2011, but amid the brewing storm, the defense and prosecution agreed it was better to continue their dialogue amongst themselves rather than in public. So in June, Judge Castillo announced that the proceedings would be postponed until February 2012, citing the very complex case. Right. The internal battle continued. The United States government refused to hand over to the court the agreement signed between attorney Humberto Loya Castro and the DEA, which according to Vicentillo's defense supported his public authority argument. Many speculated that it was a bluff by the defense and that they would never be able to prove what they were saying. For months, the prosecutors did not deny the claim, but its official response in May 2011 was to challenge the defense to prove what it claimed. I was able to watch from the front row the power play between the son of the Sinaloa cartel's boss and the United States government. The prognosis was guarded. On August 1st, 2011, I revealed a new document in which Vicentillo himself told the judge that the pact between the DEA and the cartel had been made through Humberto Loya. The agreement was that through this lawyer, the Sinaloa cartel would send information about its rivals in exchange for protection from the agency. Through Humberto Loya, a lawyer and operative, the Sinaloa cartel helped the anti-drug agency catch thousands of people over more than a decade. No mama's way. I feel sorry for all of you people out there, man, that cheerlead for these guys and that just walk around foolishly believing that there's some kind of nobility or loyalty in this game. Listen, man, I ain't got a problem with people that sell dope. I honestly don't. You want to sell dope, sell dope. Once you start hurting, innocent people and oppressing the community, then that's when it turns into something else, and I can't ride with that. And if you can, then, you're a weirdo. But this whole thing was built on bullshit. The whole thing was built on locking people up. Meanwhile, they're boiling people and tying them to trees for snitching. Shut the fuck up. Our information helped lead to the arrest or death of thousands of rival drug traffickers, said Mayo's son. He noted that the relationship between the DEA and that criminal organization was so strong that several of its members even participated in the agents' work meetings. Listen, and it wasn't nobody in law enforcement that put this on blast. You know who snitched on the Sinaloa cartel working with the DEA? The Sinaloa cartel. Vicentillo Zambada. He's the one letting you know. He's the one telling you that this is what went down. And he's telling you that this shit was built on cooperation. He noted that the relationship between the DEA and that criminal organization was so strong that several of its members even participated in the agents' work meetings. The prosecution denied Vicentillo's story, but at the same time refused to make public the documents the defense claimed existed. Finally, forced by an order from Judge Castillo on September 9, 2011, the prosecution had to present the various agreements signed between the DEA and Humberto Loya. While the United States government claimed that El Chapo was the most wanted man, he sat down with his lawyer daily and knew about his meetings with the kingpin, the time and day he would see him. The controversial agreements were outlined in black and white in contracts signed by Loya and the DEA officials. They covered the years 2005 to 2010 and were valid until December 2011. In fact, the agreements had been signed annually since 1998, despite the fact that Loya Castro had an arrest warrant in California. The situation became very uncomfortable for the United States government, as not only could the details of that arrangement be revealed, but also, if Loya Castro were to appear to testify, as Vicentillo's defenses demanded, he could speak about the alleged corruption incidents in which the Sinaloa cartel paid bribes to DEA agents in exchange for information about operations against them, as the lawyers wrote in his letter. The defense's barrage continued. They asserted that while the prosecution had uncovered some information, it was still very limited compared to what existed. Although there are significant factual disputes that must be resolved at an evidentiary hearing, the information produced by the government corroborates many of the factual assertions presented by the defense. Given the new information provided by the government, Mr. Zambada Niebla will restate the facts and note that they are undisputed, they said in a court filing. They also asserted that in both 2010 and 2011, the DEA fraudulently threatened Humberto Loya to prevent him from appearing in court in Chicago. The first warning to Loya reportedly came in 2010 after the defense had requested in court that the prosecution release documents linking the DEA to the Sinaloa cartel. Shortly after, Loya called the defense and asked to see them urgently. The meeting took place on October 26, 2010, at the luxurious Four Seasons Hotel. Attorneys Michelson, Panzer, San Angelo, and Gacciola were present, and Gacciola wrote the testimony presented to the court about what happened at that meeting. At the meeting, Mr. Loya Castro told us it was impossible for him to testify for the defense. He said Manny had contacted him and, among other things, told him that the American lawyers were doing a poor job defending Zambada. If they were more alert, they would see that what they were doing would expose many people, and that would cause problems for Mr. Loya Castro and his family. El Mayo and El Chapo, and even the American lawyers would be at risk. He also recounted that Manny told him that if the cartel's relationship with him and the United States government were exposed, and if Mr. Loya Castro's activities in providing information about other rival cartel leaders were exposed, it would not only be bad for him, but also for the United States government, because they don't want anyone to know about his relationship with the Sinaloa cartel leaders. Yeah, it sounds like what's your girl, Scam Bondo, what her face is, where she said, if we prosecute everybody in the files, it would crumble the system. Sounds like what the DEA is telling Loya over here. And he asked him to tell El Chapo and El Mayo that the lawyers' tactics could put them in danger. Mr. Loya Castro also told us that Manny told him he wanted him to meet with the DEA agents involved in the Zambada Niebla case, and he suggested he speak with Zambada Niebla to get him to change and reevaluate his defense strategy. Mr. Loya Castro told us he was terrified for his and his family's safety if the defense exposed what was happening, and that he felt he couldn't testify to what had happened. Mr. Loya Castro was visibly shaken, sweating profusely and shaking, and he repeated that he was afraid to appear for the defense and wouldn't. Loya later changed his mind and agreed to testify. However, he changed his mind again after tensions grew in the courtroom following my report and the back and forth motions between the defense and the prosecution. In early August 2011, defense counsel was informed that Mr. Loya Castro had contacted Mr. Zambada Niebla's Mexican attorney and informed him that Manny had contacted him again and told him he could not testify for the defense. He told him again that if he testified and exposed his role as an informant, and that the relationship between the U.S. government and the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, it would be bad for him, for the U.S. government, the cartel leaders, and that both they and he and his family would be in danger. He told them that Manny asked him to help El Chapo and El Mayo, that the American lawyers were doing the wrong thing and they should tell them to stop. Loya was summoned to the United States to speak with the DEA on August 18, 2011, but he declined to go. Meanwhile, the defense team for Mayo's son filed various complaints about the prison conditions and in late September 2011 declared some of the harsh measures adopted by the U.S. government's Federal Bureau of Prisons against Vicentillo unconstitutional. I love how she keeps calling him Mayo's son. He got a name. You just want to keep pimping his daddy's name. I don't get it. In January 2012, the prosecutor's office filed a third update to the charges against Vicentillo. The charges against him meant life imprisonment if they went to trial and didn't win. Both sides had a lot to lose. The DEA and the United States government lost a piece of the reputation of their war on drugs, and the son of El Mayo lost his freedom forever. Judge Castillo postponed Vicente Zambada's trial at least 5 times over 3 years. There was a reason. It wasn't in either side's interest to stretch the rubber band to the breaking point. The case was suspended. A new trial date was never set. The noise subsided, but negotiations between the two sides remained fraught. Judge Castillo rejected the defense's motion to dismiss the case on the grounds of public authority. Gasiola confided to me, when Vicentillo was extradited, he spoke with his father several times from the United States. The DEA asked him to call him and tell him to turn himself in as one of the American government's demands. A message was sent to Sinaloa asking for a phone number so his son could call him. Vicente knew he was putting his father in danger, but in the end, he did it. He spoke to him. Gasiola never clarified for me whether the U.S. authorities offered to release Vicentillo in exchange for his surrender. If they did, the drug lord valued his freedom more than that of his favorite offspring. Moreover, since Vicentillo's arrest, El Mayo had taken care of the expenses of his daughter-in-law and 3 grandchildren. Gasiola didn't clear it up for her whether, Mayo turning himself in would free Vicentillo. Evidently, that wasn't on the table for Mayo. So all you people that were telling me how noble he is and how much he missed his children, so he turned himself in and he jumped on a private plane and came to the U.S., shut up. You sound stupid. That was his opportunity to free his son right there. He didn't take it. Miss me with the bullshit. The boss's son, who was 37 at the time and had a family waiting for him outside, was constantly struggling internally. However, he was always willing to sacrifice himself to save his father. I'll stay in prison for the rest of my life, but I'm not going to testify against my father or my friend, Vicentillo told the lawyer. In early 2012, Gasiola traveled to Sinaloa. He entered El Mayo's domain and arrived at one of his ranches in Quila. El Chapo, sporting a mustache and dressed like a soldier, also showed up there. At that meeting, El Mayo and El Chapo gave Vicentillo permission to say anything he needed to and sent word that they would know how to take care of themselves. Basically, green light. Remember that green light we gave you before? Just keep using that one. Use that green light. Say what you want to say. Do what you want to do. And we got you. Don't worry about it. Everybody else can't do that. Everybody else is in trouble. We kill them. We kill their whole family if they're snitches. But you, green light. You got this. Meanwhile, prison conditions improved for Vicentillo. He can now get some sun and fresh air from time to time. And he also had paper and colored pencils with which he constantly drew and designed. Chaito, his mother, eagerly awaited his letters. And on a wall in their house, she began posting all the drawings her son had made for her. Whether Vicentillo had artistic talent or not is something he doesn't discuss in his stories or in his diary. Gasiola showed me the drawings he sent his children. Almost all of them were superheroes. I couldn't understand if it was to please his 3 sons or if it was because deep down he was still the boy the Arellano Felix family tried to murder in Tijuana at age 16. Oh, stop it, lady. Jesus Christ. Finally, Vicentillo accepted a deal with the Americans. In July 2012, he made his first sworn statement and revealed some secrets about his father's partners, buyers, and assistants. He shared a lot of sensitive information, but in reality, he never said anything that would have put his father in irremediable danger, which is why Mayo remains free. Remained. He is no longer free. My father has been one of the main leaders of the Sinaloa cartel throughout my life. To me, that's snitching on your father. You can say, oh, I'm not going to give up information on my father. That's all you had to do. So why are we picking and choosing? He began his signed statement, but not before ensuring that the American government fully complied with an essential condition. In early March 2012, Cynthia Bolboa Zazueta and her children boarded an official U.S. plane to settle in the United States under the protection of the American government. This was a part of Vicentillo's agreement to cooperate and guarantee the safety of his family. I met with Gasiola a few hours after their departure at a hotel in Mexico City. He seemed satisfied. He assured me that Cynthia had traveled with more than $3 million in cash, must be nice, with authorization to organize her new life there, because, you can't organize a new life somewhere else without $3 million. There's no way you could do that. So, I'm going to make a deal, and the United States government's going to let me bring my money, and we're going to build a new life, because who could live with less than $3 million when they start a new life? We want to arrest him for, this money that, he made illegally. We want to put him in prison, but go on, bring that shit. And don't worry, when you mention your father, we're going to make believe that you didn't mention your father, okay? Don't worry about it. The lawyer told me that from that day on, Vicentillo would disappear from the Federal Bureau of Prisons public records. Indeed, for some time his prison registration number indicated he was in the MCC. But from that moment on, whenever I tried to access him, he no longer appeared. He had vanished from the database, which by law records prisoners, admission dates, the prison where they were held, and the date they're released. Mayo's son was confined in a special prison for protected witnesses, and he managed to get his family to visit him once a week. That's nice. Gasiola also told me about the negotiations that other drug lords had made in the past, such as Ociel Cardenas Guillén. He's in the news this week, like right now, for them talking about these special privileges he got in prison and how he had his own wing of the prison. Come on, man, you guys keep telling me that the deals ain't sweet. The deals are sweet out there. These guys are getting everything they want. In 2010, a federal court in Houston sentenced the Gulf Cartel leader to 25 years in prison. At the same time, the drug lord began collaborating to dismantle the dangerous cartel and the Zetas. In the coming years, his sentence will surely be reduced to 15 years, Gasiola said of Ociel. He's free now. They'll take 54 days off his sentence per year for good behavior. In total, they'll take 610 days off, practically 2 years. So he'll only have to serve 13. Oh man, deals are nice, boy, sweet. On the other hand, the defense attorney stated that Loya will continue to be the link between the DEA and the Sinaloa cartel. He's Chapo's people, and he never betrayed him. Loya will come out of his hiding place paid for by Chapo. He paid for his house and security to hide out. Gasiola assured me that the Department of Justice and Vicente were already well advanced, but the process is long, and there are still things missing. He has to prove that he's providing valuable information that can lead to a significant arrest. Once he helps make arrests, the process will move forward. At that time, the lawyer showed me the outline of what Vicentillo would reveal months later. There were many names, some publicly known, but a good part not. Macho Prieto, Pacheco, Jorge Mongol, Manuel Torres Felix, Benny, Perrales, Ulysses, Kiki, Felipe Cabrera Sarabia, Lamberto Verdugo, Nene Jaramillo, Marisquero, Polo. Why? I asked him, referring to his having given into the agreement and not fighting for public authority. Gasiola told me that, in the end, the American government is the American government. It wasn't wise to confront them. As a journalist, as a Mexican, I would have liked to see the trial in which the unspeakable agreements between the American government and the Mexican drug cartels came to light. Of course you'd love to see that, but don't concern you. Not your life on the chopping block. Apparently, that will happen, perhaps another time. Vicentillo and his defense team couldn't risk life imprisonment. He understood that if he cooperated, he was promised that he wouldn't be in prison forever, and so it was. On April 3rd, 2013, Vicentillo signed a negotiated plea agreement with Northern District of Illinois Attorney Gary Shapiro. It was sealed for a year and not unsealed until 2014. Of course it was. Zambada Niebla's guilty plea will prevent the trial, which Judge Ruben Castillo has repeatedly postponed, from taking place, and will prevent the airing of the alleged agreements between the Sinaloa cartel and the Drug Enforcement Administration, on which the defense strategy was based. Kids, I hope you're reading between the lines, man. It's a lot of adults in the comments that their brain is the same size as yours, and they can't put these two and twos together. According to the guilty plea, based on full and continued cooperation with Zambada Niebla, the U.S. government agrees to take appropriate measures to address any security concerns that may affect Vicentillo and his family as a result of his cooperation. This includes the continued presence of Zambada Niebla and his family in the United States. In the document, Zambada Garcia pleads guilty to one of the two charges against him related to the possession and distribution of 5 kilograms or more of cocaine and 1 kilogram or more of heroin from May 2005 to December 2008, along with his co-defendants, including El Chapo and El Mayo. It also identifies Zambada Niebla as a high-level member of the Sinaloa cartel and the faction controlled by his father, Mayo Zambada. Zambada Niebla was responsible for many aspects of the cartel's operations. The defendant will plead guilty because he is, in fact, guilty to count number 1 of the third charge update, the agreement states. This part was crucial for the prosecution, the DEA, and other agencies, as it formally laid to rest the public authority arguments and the agreements between the DEA and the Sinaloa cartel. He pleaded guilty to directly paying bribes on behalf of his father to local, state, and federal officials of the Mexican government to support the drug trafficking business. Vicente Zambada Niebla is the highest-ranking person the U.S. government has in the Sinaloa cartel. They know he wasn't a big operator, but they know he was very close to his father and that he was hiding with his father, and he knows everything. Garciola told me in one of our first meetings. Vicente is identifying the brokers and their operators. He's providing all the information on them. He's collaborating with the DEA and the FBI. Since Vicentillo began collaborating with the prosecutor's office in late 2011, a string of arrests of prominent members of the Sinaloa cartel began. Some died during the operations. Others were charged with criminal charges in various U.S. courts, or members of the Sinaloa cartel, such as Felipe and Alejandro Cabrera Sarabia, Chino Antrax, and many others, were identified and reported for the first time. Garciola said that although Vicentillo hadn't heard from the Sinaloa cartel since his arrest in 2009, his father sent him information for him to present and make the arrests that would be taken into account in his collaboration to reduce his sentence. So miss me with the Mayo did not snitch talk. You're being disingenuous and you're a liar if you tell me that Mayo never snitched on nobody. This man was in jail and his father was feeding him information to sweeten his deal. Stop it. You people are hypocrites. Pick and choose who it's okay for, just like they did. Disgusting. In November 2013, Vicentillo's half-brother Serafin was arrested on the border between Nogales and Tucson, Arizona, and charged with drug trafficking in the Southern District Court of California. A year later, in another cursed November for the Zambada family, another half-brother, Ismael Zambada Imperial, known as Maito Gordo, was arrested in El Alamo, a municipality of El Salado, Culiacan, on his father's property. During a Navy raid, he complained of being beaten during his detention. He was also wanted by the Southern District Court of California, a co-defendant with his brother Ismael Zambada Sicarios and Ivan Archibaldo Guzman Loera, El Chapo's son. El Mayo is very upset about what's happening with Vicente. They just arrested Serafin and he was very angry with everyone, Garciola told me. He heard the mayor say, "I tell them no, they don't need anything and they won't help each other and get involved in the business." Even Emiliano, El Mayo's youngest, will suffer the same thing, the lawyer concluded. Serafin and Maito Gordo don't have significant connections in the criminal world because they worked outside the organization, behind their father's back. Vicente was in charge of making sure his brothers didn't get involved. They're not part of the cartel. He didn't let them move a single staple. All order was shattered when Vicente was caught. Garciola added that Vicentillo was more intelligent, more charismatic, and had more relationship skills than his stepbrothers, half-brothers. In September 2018, Serafin was released after serving a short 5.5-year prison sentence. His mother, Leti, has stated that they will not return to Mexico. Meanwhile, in April 2019, Maito Gordo was sentenced in Jalisco court to 10 years in prison for carrying weapons for the exclusive use of the military. He is being held in the maximum security prison Ceferezo II in Puente Grande, Jalisco. I don't believe that is true anymore. I believe he is free and was spotted at Disney World or some shit. On February 22nd, 2014, El Chapo was arrested in Mazatlan, Sinaloa. The operation began several days earlier, and he apparently wasn't the first target. Since mid-February, there have been raids in Culiacan, and a special Navy group raided a residence in the Guadalupe neighborhood of Culiacan to catch El Chapo. And Mayo was there with him, Garciola told me. He said that in the operation coordinated by the DEA, they thought they were going to capture both of them, but they didn't. It wasn't the first time, the lawyer assured. The two had managed to escape because the Mexican authorities had managed to tip them off and gave them time to escape before the operation arrived. One day, for example, Mayo and Chapo were at a house near a restaurant called Ramon. They were drinking and someone from the Mexican government warned them, so they jumped up from the table and left. That day, El Chapo was accompanied by local representative Lucero Guadalupe Sanchez, 25, with whom he had a romantic relationship that led her to win District 16 of Cosala as the candidate of the Sinaloa Party, PRD, PT, and PAN Alliance. Garciola did not clarify whether El Mayo was also accompanied by a woman or was alone during the operation. Come on, man. Fuckery afoot. There is fuckery afoot. El Mayo was in the same house, but he moved faster and managed to escape without a trace. More lively, he hid in the mountains. Meanwhile, El Chapo was captured a few days later at the Miramar Tower in Mazatlan, accompanied by his common-law wife, Emma Coronel, and their twin daughters. Victor J. Vasquez, a DEA supervisor assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City since 2008, will later explain what happened during those days. He said the operation was coordinated from Baja California Sur with the Navy team. We removed the federal police from the scene. We only involved Mexican Marines. It meant going into the territory and providing and advising with up-to-the-minute information. The decision not to consider the federal police was due to the level of corruption. Using them again wasn't going to work. Vasquez stated that their first objective was to arrest El Mayo at a ranch near Culiacan, where he was located, according to the information they had. On February 13, 2014, they landed near the property with 40 Marines. When they arrived, they found no one. No one there. Only a nightstand and 100 assault rifles. For 2 days, they continued the search and arrested people from El Mayo, who pointed out a house in Culiacan where the kingpin was supposed to be. When they raided the house, no one was there. They only found his baseball caps. After the failure, Vasquez decided to stop looking for El Mayo and went after El Chapo, as an informant had indicated 5 houses where he could be. For 3 days, the DEA and the Navy raided the 5 properties with more than 100 officers. In one, they found a photograph of Ovidio Guzman Lopez and his brother Joaquin, El Chapo's sons. In another, they discovered the tunnel through which he escaped with Congresswoman Lucero. These people are wilding, boy. These 25-year-old Congresswoman that was balling Chapo. They followed El Chapo's steps until they captured him in Mazatlan. El Chapo spent a year and a half in prison. In July 2016, he escaped with the help of his lawyers, his children, Ivan Archibaldo, Alfredo, and Ovidio, and Emma Coronel, according to Damaso Lopez Nunez, who until then was Guzman Loera's right-hand man. Vicentillo and his friend Chapo would meet a year and a half later in the federal court of the Eastern District of New York. Chapter 21, The Traitor? With the question mark. How are you? I hope you and everyone around you are well. I'm sending you these few words to wish you all the best during this time of year. This is definitely a jail letter. I want to tell you that I miss you very much. You can't imagine how much. Don't worry about me. I'm fine for now. There you go. Time passes. It can't be stopped. God willing, we'll soon give each other a big hug. Please take care of yourself. Say hi to everyone over there. And remember that I'm the same person and I'm with you. Have a Merry Christmas with those around you and a prosperous Happy New Year. Thank you for all your support. Don't forget how much I love and respect you. I send you a big hug. I'd like to make you lots of pages, but I can't. May God bless you. His nephew. This letter was among the documents Garciola gave me access to. It was a letter Vicentillo sent to his father in code around Christmas when he was still imprisoned at the MCC in Chicago. He had already made the decision to collaborate and had begun sharing information. This was a message to make it clear that he loved him and would protect him. Remember, I'm the same. Will he be the same now? In 2013, Garciola told me that the U.S. government had rented Cynthia an apartment that wasn't in her name for her and her children. Meanwhile, he was able to make phone calls and speak with Chaito, his mother. Vicente is in good spirits. His greatest concern is the safety of his family and the future of his children. He fell into the trap of following his father's footsteps. Life kept pushing him. His father didn't really want him to get involved, but circumstances pushed him. Vicente doesn't want that to happen to his children and decided to cut it short because it was the only way. He's doing it for his children. They do it for a lot of reasons. To stay alive, to have their cake and eat it too. More times than not is what we're seeing. Whenever you're listening to the story of somebody in this situation, it's always best to take everything with a punch of salt because, for all you know, when he was in the cartel under his daddy, he was woohoo! You know what I'm saying? All the way in, cowboy. Then they get in the book, they have the regrets, and they want to tell everybody how, I didn't want this life. He's doing it for his children, the lawyer told me when explaining the decision his client had made. Now he sees his family frequently. He sits with his children eating chips and drinking soda from the prison vending machines. Garciola told me with emotion. He truly appreciated it and was glad that his life was returning to some sense of normalcy. What Vicente misses most is his father, his mother, his sisters. He's studying, but there are few classes. He paints, he loves reading, both fiction and nonfiction biographies and history. His father is sad that Vicente has to do this. He knows it's dangerous, but he had no choice. If it becomes known that Vicente is a snitch, he won't receive any more information. He continues to receive information through the cartel. If the cartel members find out he's fingering everyone, regardless of size, color, or sex, there will be cruelty against his family. He's in prison. They don't know he's making deals. Don't you think in that game, these guys get locked up, you should just assume that they're talking. We have protected them as much as we could, but now we can't. When this is all over, he'll remain a legal resident, along with his family. He'll truly have the opportunity to have the life he wanted. Sure. My last meeting with the lawyer was on May 20th, 2015. I was in Berkeley, California, investigating the disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students. Fernando Garciola had called me several times that year, asking me to come see him as soon as possible because he didn't have much time left. He wanted to finish telling me and giving me documents. He asked me to publish the story because he was convinced it would help people understand that El Mayo was the cartel. is the cartel and will be the cartel. In fact, the boss joked with the lawyer when they met. Cartel? Which cartel? It's just me and my friend Chapo. And why was Garciola so intent on getting this information out there, huh? Is this his good deed? I don't know. Is that part of the, guilt or regret that comes with being close to the end of your life? For 4 years, Garciola was the linchpin between father and son. He was the one who bounced back and forth with information so Vicentillo could continue collaborating, and unwittingly, so Mayo could clear his own path. That was the last time I saw him. The cancer he had successfully battled for some time had spread, but he always remained strong, his complexion full. He never seemed to me like a man on the verge of death. The day they feared arrived. Vicentillo was scheduled to testify against Joaquin Guzman Loera, his youngest son's godfather. El Chapo had been recaptured on January 8, 2016 in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, and a year later, he was extradited to the United States to face trial in the Eastern District Court of New York, where he was co-defendant with Ismael Zambada Garcia, who has never set foot in jail until now. El Chapo was charged with a criminal career spanning more than 20 years, during which he allegedly trafficked at least 150 tons of cocaine and other illegal drugs, firearms, money laundering, and more than 33 homicides. A seizure order was also issued for a fortune worth at least $14 billion. The guilty verdict was past the statute of limitations. It was a cold morning in New York on January 3rd, 2019 at 9:30 a.m. El Chapo's trial resumed after the holiday recess. Judge Brian M. Cogan presided over the Brooklyn courtroom. It was the 22nd day of the trial. Brian Cogan. What year is this? 2019? Cogan. I guess he's still the judge. Cogan is still the judge over Mayo's situation. El Chapo's trial resumed after the holiday recess. Judge Brian M. Cogan presided over the Brooklyn courtroom. It was the 22nd day of the trial. The media and the defense attorneys themselves had turned the courtroom into a spectacle, and Emma Coronel's daily presence was the icing on the cake. Representing the United States government were prosecutors Amanda Liscombe, Andrea Goldberg, Gina Parlovecchio, Michael Rabati, and Patricia Natopoulos. Representing the defense were Jeffrey Lichtman, Eduardo Balarezo, and William Purpura. Good morning. Happy New Year, Judge Cogan said. Let's admit the jury. Okay, everyone in your seats. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, best wishes for this new year. I know everyone is well rested and ready to go, so we'll just do that. It was probably a happy new year for many of those present, but not for El Chapo. It certainly wasn't a good day for Vicente either. The day began with the insipid testimony of America Piña, SIC, the person responsible for recording Guzman Loera's calls at the MCC in New York. After her testimony ended, the judge invited the jury to leave the courtroom and dismissed everyone. We're going to need to make a few adjustments in the courtroom. If you can wait in the hallway, I'll bring you back in 90 seconds, Cogan said. The government can bring in its next witness, please. Vicente Zambada Niebla entered, who looked at his friend Chapo and greeted him. Okay, everyone, sit down. We're going to have a side discussion, not open to the public, the judge said, as the defense attorneys wanted to make an objection. Separately, out of earshot of the audience, Attorney Balarezo asked the judge, I just want to ask the court to ask the government to tell its witnesses not to make any kind of gestures or signals to Mr. Guzman. Ray Zambada, like Mr. Cifuentes, and now this gentleman, look at Mr. Guzman and smile. This man, Zambada, who's on the stand right now, just winked and made gestures to Mr. Guzman. So I just asked the government that its witnesses not make any gestures or anything else to the defendant. The lawyer spoke on behalf of El Chapo, who apparently did not like Vicentillo's attitude. Look, the request is a little late, Cogan said. It would have been nice to know that before we had the witness on the stand and the jury present. From here on out, I understand they won't tell you now. In any case, I believe this witness simply nodded to the defendant at best, the prosecution said. The judge promised that he would ask Vicentillo not to make any more signs to El Chapo. The government's next witness, please, Colgan told the room. Your Honor, the government calls Vicente Zambada Niebla, who is testifying under oath. Please state and spell your name for the record, said Prosecutor Liscombe. Vicente Zambada Niebla. Vicentillo replied, standing in a blue prison uniform. He sat down. He was about to begin his interrogation to tear El Chapo to shreds. Good morning, Mr. Zambada. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, said Mayo's son, greeting those present. Who is your father? Ismael Zambada Garcia. Vicentillo was no longer the young man who, at 23, had ordered the first execution of his life. Now he was weeks away from turning 44, and he was here to fight for freedom, even if it meant the end of El Chapo. For his part, El Chapo knew, or at least remembered, that winter morning, that Vicentillo had always wanted to be free. Now he would be free at his expense. Vicentillo was presented for 3 consecutive days. During the so-called trial of the century show, he recounted portions of what he had already written in his diary, in his sworn confessions to the United States government, and in other writings he himself had written that are included in this book. Unlike the tone he had used in the diary and writings, where he referred to Joaquin Guzman Loera simply as Chapo, during the trial he repeatedly and almost unbearably referred to him as my friend Chapo. Perhaps he thought this would soften the betrayal that was culminating in those days. I mean, in his writings he did that too. We heard that throughout this whole book. It lasted several hours of interrogation that stretched into 2 more days. On the last day, harassed by the defense, Vicentillo confirmed what Gacciola had told me years earlier. El Chapo knew I would testify because I pleaded guilty when he was free with my father, and I agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. I don't see the future, and I didn't know my friend Chapo would be here. He's not my enemy. Balarezo listed a long list of detainees, including his client, which evidently did not include Mayo. My father has not been arrested in Mexico or the United States. His friends aren't so lucky, the lawyer joked. What can I say? Vicentillo retorted in the same tone. Balarezo questioned him about whether he had provided information about his father, among other drug traffickers, in the more than 100 sessions with the U.S. prosecutors and agents. Vicentillo asserted that as part of the agreement, he provided information about Mayo Zambada's houses, hideouts, landing strips, offices, and coordinates. But, despite this information, Mayo remains free. It's not my fault that my father wasn't arrested. Is that my fault? So he told on his father, but, gave him the heads up too. Somehow, there was some fuckery afoot. I know that during the 4 years of that collaboration, while Gacciola was the linchpin, Mayo monitored what his son said. Vicentillo didn't have the power to betray him, but he did have the ability to influence his collaboration from the outside. Vicentillo never spoke to the United States government about his father's businesses, his partners in large-scale legitimate companies, or the legal fortune his family had built using his father's illegal funds as a source. At least he didn't do so in any of the documents Gacciola gave me access to. What are you talking about? We've heard about every business partner that his father's ever had in this book. We've heard about every legitimate business that he owns. What am I missing here? Vicentillo's testimony was rigged from the outset. Judge Colgan vetoed the most sensitive topics at the prosecutor's request. The Sinaloa cartel's agreement with the DEA, El Chapo's payments to American anti-drug agents, and presidential corruption in Mexico. 2 topics that El Mayo's son knew better than any of the witnesses presented during El Chapo's 3-month trial. The judge ruled that the massive corruption in Mexico had no bearing on El Chapo's guilt, even though the prosecution's own witnesses knew about or had seen the bribe payments to president after president by El Mayo and El Chapo. Direct discussion of the payments to Felipe Calderón and Enrique Peña Nieto, who was in office when the trial began in November 2018, was prohibited. We're going through the same thing now with these files. Same thing. These Epstein files, same thing. These pigs don't want to go to prison. So these punk judges are never gonna hold the powerful accountable. They're cowards. And if you ask me, if you're that cowardly, then you're complicit. You're part of the whole deal. So maybe you need to be held accountable too. When Lichtman attempted to do so at the opening of the trial, he was censored. When cross-examinations attempted to elicit certain things from witnesses, the prosecution argued that it was invalid questioning, and the judge agreed. At the opening of the trial, Lichtman argued before the jury. As I said before, this team of U.S. prosecutors will tell you that Joaquin Guzman Loera is the greatest drug dealer in history. But you're going to learn in this case, through the government's witnesses, that he's not even the greatest drug trafficker in Mexico. But who is? A man who doesn't make television shows, doesn't have his face on lunchboxes, doesn't meet with Sean Penn, isn't sung about by musicians, yes he is, doesn't escape from prison because he's never been in one, now he has. A man who is 70 years old, late 70s, and has operated drug trafficking in Mexico for 55 years. So he told the judge, standing in front of a judge and telling him how he paid off politicians and police for 50 years. That sounds like cooperation to me. Without ever being arrested, till now, despite having been indicted in an American court 40 years ago, a man you've never heard of to this day in the United States, a man named Ismael Zambada, or Mayo for short, Mayo Zambada. That's Chapo snitching. All you people that say Chapo never snitched, shut up, you sound stupid. Through his lawyer, putting a finger on somebody else to save his own ass. That's what they do. How did a man you never heard of become the biggest drug trafficker on the planet? I'll tell you how. He paid for it. He bribed the entire Mexican government, including at the very top, the current president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, and, to be conservative, the previous one as well, Felipe Calderón Hinojosa. I'll say this even more emphatically. The current and former presidents of Mexico received hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes from El Mayo, according to government witnesses. Even if it was histrionics, even if it was to defend a criminal like El Chapo, Lichtman was right. On November 14th, in a restricted conversation, after the prosecution requested that the defense's arguments be suppressed at the initial hearing, the judge warned El Chapo's defense that they wouldn't be able to keep their promise to present evidence to the jury. There was testimony from the prosecution's witnesses that confirmed Lichtman's claims, and they couldn't lie or they would be ruined. El Chapo couldn't present this in his defense because he wasn't allowed to, not because it didn't exist. In 2000, after 70 years in power, the PRI lost the presidency for the first time to PAN candidate Vicente Fox. A profound debacle for the political party. 12 years later, they returned to power with the young Peña Nieto, whose political campaign was plagued by scandals related to his unexplained financing, similar to what happened with Fox. In 2012, the spending limit was 366 million pesos, and according to investigations by a special commission created in the Chamber of Deputies, the PIR members spent more than 4 billion pesos, a significant portion of which was managed by Monex, a financial company that has been accused of money laundering in the United States. And let me explain something to you. In Mexico, they'll out these presidents, right? These presidents in the U.S. been stealing money 100 years, 200 years. You know what I'm saying? It's no different, right? They just own the media here. The media does what they're told. Everybody stays quiet and keeps eating shit. But it's no different. Corruption in the USA, every president has been corrupt. Every president has done something that can put them in a prison or should have put them in a prison but didn't. That's my belief. Some of y'all are too blinded to see that shit. If anyone knew about the Sinaloa cartel's payments to Peña Nieto, it was Mayo's son. Vicente knows there was money for Enrique Peña Nieto's presidential campaign, Gaciolo told me. But it wasn't Vicentillo who spoke about it. It was a very close associate of his father, Alex Cifuentes, when El Chapo's defense maneuvered to get him to repeat what he had already secretly testified to the prosecution. The president allegedly received at least $100 million in bribes from the cartel. When the information became public, Peña Nieto denied it. Nor could Vicentillo's defense team question him about Garcia Luna, Marta Sahagun's children, and many others. In the end, however, Vicentillo would emerge unscathed from El Chapo's trial, as the prosecutor later acknowledged. After cooperating with the U.S. government for at least 8 years, he would be rewarded. Before we begin, let me say that I am truly going to ask the members of the audience to respect the proceedings taking place here. These are real episodes, not some kind of soap opera. So I expect and demand the people conduct themselves appropriately in the courtroom, Judge Ruben Castillo stated sternly. Thus began the hearing at 10:31 on May 30th, 2019 in the Northern District Court of Chicago, where after years of denunciation and cooperation, Vicentillo received his sentence. There was Mayo's son, no longer in the orange clown jumpsuit. Representing his defense were Frank Perez, his father's lawyer now, Alvin Michelson, Ed Panzer, George Sanangelo. Gaciolo would have liked to be there and see the end of the story. Erica L. Cicila began on behalf of the prosecution. There is no doubt that the defendant's conduct has caused immense harm to people in Mexico, but also in this city and throughout the United States, and it is serious conduct that warrants a severe sentence. Were it not for the defendant's cooperation, and as the court has just noted, the defendant's conduct would have warranted a life sentence under the guidelines. Next up was Amanda Liscombe, the tough-talking assistant attorney general who was part of the team that brought down El Chapo in the New York trial. The court, as you know, must consider the entire picture, which includes the defendant's the cooperation, and that cooperation was extensive. It has been extensive, and it must also consider his performance and the history and characteristics of this particular defendant. And in that regard, something that speaks volumes about the defendant's character is how this collaboration arose. The defendant approached the DEA to collaborate approximately 10 years ago. Then after his arrest and extradition to the United States, he began to collaborate extensively with the government. That collaboration has been ongoing and constant. And the government fully expects, and the defense has stated, and the defendant has stated, that this collaboration will continue after the sentencing here today. I was a member of the judicial team that prosecuted El Chapo Guzman, and Mr. Zambada was one of the witnesses I presented at the trial. In my career as a prosecutor, he is one of the most cooperative people I have ever worked with. And I think the court should be mindful of that when issuing a sentence. He was a prize cooperator. He was, worth his weight in gold as far as cooperating. Cecilia spoke again. The defendant has consistently cooperated and has always done so at an extraordinary level. This has not come without cost. Therefore, the government believes it is necessary for the sentence to provide a variety of incentives to other drug offenders who are considering cooperating with the government and changing their lifestyle. Meanwhile, you guys are calling him and everybody else snitches, right? But they're just opening up a lane for you when you go bad because you didn't know that this life was what it was. They can look at this defendant and know that change is possible, that they can correct their mistakes, and that they can also be treated fairly and promptly by the government and the judicial system upon receiving a sentence for their actions. During the hearing, it was revealed that the eldest son, Vicente Zambada Niebla, 25, had recently graduated from university with a degree in automotive design and real estate. This event moved Vicentillo. When I was 11, they shot my grandmother and my mother. They attempted to kill me for the first time when I was 16. That was the first of many. I'm very happy that my son is here and that he has a different life. So then admit that your family was just as oppressive to itself as it was to the people of Sinaloa and the people of Mexico. But I think you loved the game when you was in it. That's just me. What do I know? When he testified against El Chapo, he stated that he was afraid of retaliation. On that May 30th, in the Northern District of Illinois courtroom, Vicentillo wasn't the same man he'd been before. Painting, which had initially been his hobby, had become a discipline. He taught himself to play the piano and guitar. It's said he had read nearly 400 titles during his 9 years of imprisonment in the United States. It was very, very difficult for him to be a witness against his own father, said defense attorney Perez, although Mayo was never actually in the dock. He became conflicted. After his testimony, he learned about the articles about a son betraying his father, and to this day, he's still dealing with that. And it's a very difficult situation to handle. Well, don't worry, your father betrayed you too. Because if truly you didn't want to be in that game, and he pushed you into it, you too were betrayed. It was Vicentillo's turn. Good morning, he said, greeting Judge Castillo. He had appeared there 9 years ago to plead not guilty. A lot had happened. First of all, I would like to thank you for having me here today, on this day when I will receive my sentence. I have waited a long time for this day to come, and today we are here thanks to you. So first of all, I would like to thank you. I would also like to express my deep remorse and regret for the poor decisions I made in the past. And I think the best way to start is by asking for forgiveness from all those people whom I, in one way or another, hurt, directly or indirectly. I would also like to ask for forgiveness from my children, my wife, and the woman who gave me life, Chaito, who is my mother, because they have all suffered greatly because of everything we've been through. I believe that every person changes their life or leads their life based on good or bad decisions. I've been telling people my whole life that the most important thing you do on a daily basis is decide. Because one decision can change everything. As I said a moment ago, I made some bad decisions, for which I still accept full responsibility and truly regret having made them. I would like to tell you, Your Honor, that this regret did not occur yesterday, nor did it occur today, as I stand before you about to receive my sentence. I would like to respectfully tell you that this feeling of regret or remorse has been with me for years, and I believe the people on my side, the government, and my lawyers, will not allow me to lie to you. As I've demonstrated my regret through actions and deeds, not just words. As I said before, I still have my children, my wife, whom I love with all my heart, and they are the most important things to me. They and my closest family members are the ones who have supported me with great faith and hope to move forward and also become a better person. I've sacrificed a lot by leaving and taking them out of the world we lived in. I'd like to tell you, Your Honor, without hesitation, that I will do this again as long as I can see them happy, free from all fear, see them live a life of peace, and above all, a happy life. I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Today, that chance is in your hands. In response to the appeal by Mayo's son, Judge Castillo delivered a significant speech, a rhetorical portrait of drug trafficking. According to the government, in its request for a 17-year sentence, you claimed that between roughly 1996 and 2008, you oversaw massive shipments of narcotics from Central and South America to Mexico and ultimately to the United States. And I understand that the way you came to do this was due to circumstances of the family you were born into. It's not like you suddenly decided you wanted to join this organization. In fact, you were born into the organization that already existed. Many of the people you knew, many of the people your family knows have died violently. And I know your family has suffered. And it's shameful that these drug wars continue and that the value of life in a country I personally love dearly means nothing. Many in Washington want to build a wall, when most of these drugs are coming in a way that a wall won't do anything. Anything. I've been involved on the front lines of the so-called war on drugs. I've personally risked my life dealing with Colombian drug traffickers, and I would be the first to admit here in open court for the record, after 25 years as a federal judge, that if there's a so-called war on drugs, we've lost it. We've lost it. That term, I mean, you lost it. You know, you one of the judges that was shutting everything down when he was trying to prove to you that the DEA was making deals with these guys, and the DEA has been in cahoots the whole time, and you push things back and you shut things down. So you should probably shut the fuck up. You know what I'm saying? You remind me of like, imagine a general, a Mexican general that took money crying over soldiers that were killed by the cartel. Maybe you should shut the fuck up. Maybe it's not your place. That term, collaboration, has suddenly become something despised in this country. And frankly, I don't understand it. In this country, 20 to 30% of all cases prosecuted in the criminal justice system depend on individuals cooperating. If you don't have collaboration, you can't have a successful prosecution. Yet we see people at the top in Washington, D.C., people in this city, talking about collaboration as if it's a bad thing. I'm not going to say his name, but someone in Washington, D.C. said that flipping should be banned, that anyone who cooperates with the Department of Justice is a rat. I mean, the Department of Justice is a rat. The United States government is a rat. It's sad that the coverage of your case, Mr. Zambada Niebla, is going in this direction. This was the headline in Sunday's paper. The cartel kid who sold out El Chapo. As far as I'm concerned, you didn't sell out El Chapo. I think it was the other way around. You collaborated with the United States of America. That's what happened. And if we don't have collaboration, the Department of Justice simply doesn't win cases. Well, I'm glad you admitted that. We may have lost the war on drugs, but we can't afford to lose the war on crime. Yeah, good luck with that. You should start in that White House over there. You know what I'm saying? In that Capitol, you should start there. And so, after very carefully evaluating the two arguments from the defense, from the government, I believe the appropriate sentence for you is 15 years. After speaking bluntly and without reservation, Judge Castillo told Vicentillo that he would take into account the year he had spent in Mexico, so he would have 4 years left in prison. According to the calculations of criminal defense attorney Stephen G. Rouse, whom I interviewed in Tucson, and including the various benefits he is entitled to for good behavior and other reasons, Vicentillo is very likely free now. Absolutely free. After his release, Vicentillo will be under supervision for 5 years, during which he will be prohibited from using illegal drugs or alcohol. And to do so, he must routinely submit to a blood test. He's probably off papers by now. In the United States, he must conscientiously seek and work legally for employment, or conscientiously complete a program of study or job training that will prepare him for work. The sentencing guidelines including a clause stating that he will not intentionally meet or communicate with any member or associate of the Sinaloa cartel. But the prosecution requested that it not be applied due to the ambiguity inherent in the definition of what constitutes a member of the Sinaloa cartel. This opens the door for Vicentillo to see El Mayo again, the organization's sole and true leader. They couldn't control what is considered a cartel member and what's not, so they took it off the table for him. Must be nice. Ismael Zambada Garcia has pursued a criminal career for more than 50 years with absolute cold-bloodedness. He has killed his best friends, his partners, and his competitors. And in many ways, he has betrayed his most beloved son, Vicentillo, who, despite being a prisoner for 10 years, continued to be useful in his criminal business by getting rid of everything that was in his way. He saw his 3 sons in prison, Vicentillo, Serafin, and Mayito Gordo, and even then he hasn't been able to stop. His criminal career is stronger than any other emotion or interest. From the research I did for the Lords of Narco, El Chapo struck me as a much smaller man than the great kingpin and leading drug trafficker of all time that the U.S. and Mexican governments constructed. I wrote his story to show that he didn't have the intelligence, personality, or power to lead the conglomerate of criminals that make up the Sinaloa cartel, and that it was corruption that had created El Chapo, he was merely a reflection. Listen, he might have been. It's just like the difference between Mencho and Chapo. Chapo was violent, Mencho was more violent. Mayo was violent, Chapo was more violent. Does not mean that he was not partners with him, because all we've seen through this book is Mayo and Chapo locked at the hip, using each other's snitchery and trickery to move forward. So miss me with the trying to make him smaller. In the story, I reconstructed the Sinaloa cartel. There were missing pieces of the puzzle. Something didn't add up. Only by digging deep could one understand what the missing piece was. El Mayo and his permanent base of operations in Los Angeles, which is as important as the one in Culiacan. The king who for decades has decided who lives and who dies within his organization. When a war starts up and when it ends. The one who decides from his throne where, how, and when the drugs are shipped. The one who has legitimate businesses that will earn him and his family millions for generations, as Gasiola said. And Mayo doesn't have to live crouched in the mountains, but in his green kingdom built in El Dorado, Costa Rica, Quila, and El Salado, right there in Culiacan. When El Chapo's trial ended, various DEA sources commented that El Mayo was stronger and operating more than ever, and that he wasn't thinking about retirement. In 2017, during a brief meeting with Serafin's mother, Letty, I asked her about the Kingpin's health. Some speculated that he's old, sick, and thinking about retiring. She told me that, although he has knee problems, he's perfectly healthy and strong. For now, Miles shouldn't worry about being pursued. In real terms, he isn't a target for the United States government. And in President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador's rhetoric, he's non-existent. Remember, when P&J tried to give up Chapo, or when they did give up Chapo, they tried to give them Arturo, Mayo, and Chapo. The United States wasn't interested. Again, they're not interested until they're interested. El Chapo is no longer there to steal the spotlight. But Nemesio Oseguera, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, whose violence puts them in the spotlight, is still there. Not as of last month. He is no longer there. He is now deceased. And there are 4 of Joaquin Guzman Loera's 18-year-old offspring. Ivan Archibaldo, Alfredo Guzman Salazar, and their half-brothers Ovidio and Joaquin, whose impulsive natures make them ideal bait. The 4 manage what's left of their father's criminal businesses, a far cry from what their father had achieved. They are not 4 anymore, and they're definitely not 18 years old. Ivan and Alfredo are still at large, and Joaquin and Ovidio are in custody, and they've made deals. All right? Everybody gets a deal. On Thursday, October 17, 2019, a watershed occurred in Culiacan, the headquarters of the Sinaloa cartel. Shortly after 3 p.m., children were leaving school. Their mothers were picking them up or shopping to prepare the day's meal. Employees were taking their midday break and restaurants were full. And at that moment, in a span of no more than 30 minutes, Culiacan became a war zone. Armed civilians traveling in luxury cars and SUVs burned vehicles, blocked roads, and terrorized the population. The images were broadcast worldwide. Ovidio, the son of El Chapo, was supposedly being held by the army, and the group's objective was to free him. In the end, the army was ordered to release him by the Public Secretary Cabinet, headed by Alfonso Durazo, Secretary of Security and Citizen Protection, and comprised of the Secretary of Defense, Luis Crescencio Sandoval, the Secretary of the Navy, José Rafael Ojeda Durán, and the Commander of the National Guard, Luis Rodriguez Bucio. The cabinet argued that the Chapitos, as they are known, had been stronger than the state. President Lopez Obrador said the order was given to save lives. The more than 9,000 troops in Culiacan from the IX military zone, state, municipal, ministerial, and federal police, and more than 200 National Guard troops who had arrived the previous day, the government says were not sufficient. At the same time, at a toll booth on the highway connecting Culiacan with the municipality of Costa Rica, where Mayo Zambada's domain is located, a convoy of luxury SUVs appeared carrying civilians dressed in civilian clothes and armed to the teeth, similar to the group that had been causing havoc in the city. They approached the military checkpoint with several armed men who saw them arriving without surprise. One of the civilians, tall and robust, standing out from the crowd, approached to greet the soldiers, pulled away behind a truck along with who, one might imagine, was the military commander. The 6-year term had changed. There was a new president, but the scene harked back to episodes from the past recounted in detail by Vicentillo in his writings or in his diary. Was the state actually outnumbered by the drug traffickers, or were the drug traffickers able to act simultaneously in a coordinated manner without fail because part of the state was on their side and has been the case for decades? Right? And that whole Culiacanazo for nothing because, what, a year later he was caught? All that shit for nothing. That day in Culiacan, the drug traffickers would not have been able to act quickly and effectively without the complicity of some of the institutions responsible for protecting citizens. Just as happened on April 30th, 2008, when the war broke out in Culiacan between Mayo and El Chapo against the Beltran-Leyva, Carrillo-Fuentes, Zetas gangs. The real dilemma is not whether the state will engage in a shootout with drug traffickers and put people's lives at risk, as López Obrador claimed, generating a false debate. What is truly substantive is whether the president is willing to use state force to break the decades of complicity between the Sinaloa cartel and government institutions, which is what makes criminals strong. Made them so strong that Mexican government don't know what the fuck to do with itself right now. To achieve this, he must first arrest the corrupt officials and politicians who have been and are on the Sinaloa cartel's payroll, who have attended its bosses' parties for years as if they were members of their own family, including some who are currently members of Morena, the president's political party. He must seize the companies directly linked to Mayo Zambada and El Chapo, which have been listed by the United States government for more than a decade and continue to operate as front companies for drug trafficking or money laundering. Economic power is what allows the cartel to pay bribes to public officials, buy weapons and ammunition, and pay the salaries of the hitmen who terrorized the population of Culiacan for more than 8 hours. But the Sinaloa cartel and Mayo Zambada aren't invincible. We know that today, for sure. Some of y'all still don't believe it. Some of y'all still think they're invincible. You guys work real jobs. You guys have to raise real children. And if you still a cheerleader for this kind of shit, you've missed the point. You still think they're invincible. But the Sinaloa cartel and Mayo Zambada aren't invincible. They're not smarter, they're not stronger. It's just that they have the protection of part of the state and are playing with the dice loaded in their favor. And has been the case over 50 years. El Mayo's gonna die a legend without ever having set foot in jail, I heard an American government official say recently. Wrong. It's October 2019. Another exclaimed, he's the boss of everyone. He's always been. While El Chapo begins to count each day in his cell, almost a pit with no windows, no air, no sun, El Mayo now has new partners. They're always replaceable. Amado and Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, Arturo Beltrán Leyva, Guzman Loera, so on and so forth. The current strongest men at his side are 5. Mauricio Gastelum Hernandez, about whom Vicentillo never spoke. Alfonso Limon Sanchez, who escaped from Culiacan prison in 2017 and probably doesn't know that it was his partner Mayo's own son who betrayed him to the gringos and gave him the secret to arrest him. Gabriel Valenzuela, who escaped from prison with Limon. Ildegaldo Gastelum Garcia, originally from Sinaloa, who is Vicentillo's godfather. And Javier León Pérez, whose financial power allows him to act as a kind of bank for members of the Sinaloa cartel. Gastelum Hernandez was born on September 22, 1975. He is said to be considered a very powerful man in the drug trafficking world. Sometimes he says he's originally from Culiacan, and other times from La Angostura. In the information provided to the Public Property Registry, he claims to live at 3216 Estero Barron Street in a middle-class neighborhood called Pradera Dorada in Culiacán. Like his partner, he likes to pose as a businessman. In fact, he is one. He owns several companies: Transportes Refrigerados, Desarrollo Inmobiliario, Financiero, Gasbel, and Culiacán Technology Park, among others. These companies are dedicated to the transportation of all types of goods within the country and abroad, as well as the purchase, sale, and lease of transport vehicles, construction of private and public works, residential, office, commercial, industrial, agricultural, maritime, river, and lake warehouses, well drilling, dams, aqueducts, and canals, marketing, urbanization, promotion, and management of housing, and even a concession for the sale of gasoline, diesel, and lubricants from Pemex is registered. In some companies, Gastelum Hernandez appears as a direct partner, while in others, he uses a frontman and acts as a sole director. The individuals listed as partners are Mauricio Hector Hugo and Jose Manuel Gastelum Beltran, Marcelino Gastelum Rubio, and Maria Dolores Hernandez Juarez. Fucking 5 last names. I'm glad to be done with this shit. You can't say he's a man without a sense of humor, especially considering the side business he pursues. In 2010, he and his brother Julio Cesar Gastelum Hernandez founded Naturalezas del Cielo, a company dedicated to the purchase and sale, productions, propagation, and marketing of all types of plants, including ornamental plants. It closed in 2019. The Gasbel Company began to attract public attention when it was discovered that it was one of the owners of the land where the Mario Lopez Valdez administration planned to build the new Culiacán General Hospital, which is now more than 50% complete. At that time, Dr. Jaime Otañez Garcia, who was a partner with Mayo in one of his dairy companies, held a management position in the Ministry of Health. At the beginning of 2019, Gasbel began its liquidation process. It also liquidated the Nical Company in July 2019. Mauricio Gastelum has replaced other service providers for Mayo. Through his businesses, he handles the land transportation of drugs from Central America and Mexico. It is claimed that, replacing Marisquero, he now does this work for many people in Sinaloa, but primarily for Mayo. Meanwhile, Ildegaldo Gastelum Garcia was arrested in 2015 in an operation carried out by the Navy in Mazatlan. However, in an unexpected turn of fortune, he was released because no one could pinpoint who he was or his importance in the Sinaloa cartel. What? Today, he sits at the right hand of El Mayo and is considered the king in Honduras. Ismael Zambada Garcia's partners come and go over the years, but the only one who always remains is him. The question is whether Vicentillo will truly be able to sever his ties with his father, or whether he will reclaim his throne. The distance between father and son is only 5 more years or the rest of his life. And I would argue the rest of both their lives, because his father is in custody in a federal prison in the United States of America. And there you have it. The Traitor, by Anabel Hernández and Vicentillo Zambada, The Secret Diary of the Son of El Mayo. Again, there were parts of this book that I enjoyed. There were parts of this book that I didn't enjoy. I feel like the first 2 chapters and the last 4 chapters had more to do with the story than anything else. I feel like everything else was a long list of basically people that he was prepared to speak on, turn over, tell on. There were some dope pieces of this story. I think the marketing of it and the selling of the Traitor imaging and stuff like that, I thought I would learn more about Vicentillo. But we stuck it out, we made it through it, and I'm glad we did. And now it's here for people to enjoy. The most enjoyable part for me was that you guys went through it with me. This book has made it more than clear to me that the Sinaloa cartel was built on the backs of innocent poor people with the help of American law enforcement. For all the no snitching rules and policies that y'all throw around in the comments and in the chats, the one thing we've learned clearly on this channel is that everybody is okay with picking and choosing who is an actual snitch and who is not, who's a rat and who's a boss. What we learned is the boss can be the biggest rat. And most time is. So before you consider a life a crime, consider the lies that have been fed to generations upon generations of disposable paper soldiers that were thrown away and discarded, that were told that their loyalty would be rewarded. Meanwhile, the person making these promises to them was breaking all the rules they created. Never forget, the rules aren't for them, they're for you. Peace.